a Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. On this week's episode of Build Hatch, I got to sit down in Melbourne and chat with Elinore Moshe, otherwise known as the construction coach. As you'll hear, Elinore is doing some wonderful things in corporate life in construction, and not only here in Australia, but also internationally. Elinore and I had a really insightful chat, and I especially wanted small businesses to hear about how the corporate space is travelling in construction right now. Elinore is very passionate about the industry, so let's get into it. Elinore Moshe from the Construction Coach. Welcome to Build Hatch.
Hi, Aaron. It's great to be here and even better to be on the other side of the microphone.
Definitely. So, like all our guests, Elinore, before we talk about the wonderful things that you're doing in that space, did you grow up here in Melbourne?
I was born in Israel, but yes, I grew up in Melbourne since I was a mere 8 months old, so very local to the area.
And what were you like as a child?
Not too dissimilar from what I am right now. Outspoken, I stood up for what I wanted, quite stubborn, very independent in my nature and my thinking. I never fit in schools. I never fit in high school. I never fit in university. And it was only very much when I got to my corporate career that the oppression and pressure to fit in took over. But that's another discussion. I grew up as an only child, and what that enabled me to do was to value my own company and to spend the most time with myself. And I can see how the career that I have now in thought leadership has truly been seeded from me being very good by myself. I'm great with my thoughts and my own company. And that was me as a child, still very bookish, writing books as a kid on fantasy worlds, and that's what I get to do today. So I was born for this.
So, what influenced you to get into construction? Like, were you seeking that industry from a young age?
Definitely not. I've got typical Jewish parents. I was meant to be a doctor or a lawyer, and you caved to that influence, but I didn't. I was meant to be a lawyer. But my parents were always really good at letting me express what I wanted, follow whatever path I wanted. I actually, in year 12, I was very good at art, but I was also very frustrated with the creative process. But I pursued architecture. And whilst I slogged my way through architecture, I realized I am a creative, but not in that typical sense. And what the architecture world was missing for me was the logic, the structure, and the processes around making a dream, which was the build, come into fruition. And when I was seeking what further higher education should I do, property didn't speak to me. Urban planning definitely meant nothing to me. I could not imagine doing another 3 years of perspex models and sticking balsa wood together at 3 a.m. So construction management was the only option available at the time. And when I started discovering it, it was an industry that was everything at once and started answering all my questions, but also starting to fulfill that left brain, right brain balance that I have, which is that creative process, but also that logic, that structure, that reasoning and analysis that you need in order to succeed. So I stumbled my way into the industry, and coming up to 8, 9 years later, I'm still here, but in a completely different shape and form.
Now, tell us what it's like. I mean, you mentioned that you weren't the traditional child growing up. So, what's it like? What are some of the challenges of a woman entering the construction industry, which, back then would have been even more difficult than what it is now? Like, what were some of the challenges like back then?
Good question, and I have unconventional perspectives on this. It's not for anyone to agree or disagree with, but to simply know there's more than one way to be the person that you need to be in the industry. When I started out, I remember the first lecture that I had, there were 10 women in the industry. And it was drilled down into women coming into the industry. You are the minority. You must fight. You must do this. You have to bear the flag. So I did. I did that for many years. But things started to crack in that narrative because I realized that this narrative was going on and on and on. Nothing actually is changing. Everything is changing on the surface level when it comes to, women in construction. And women especially were putting themselves out there, not on their merit, not on their results, but on their gender. And I did that, and it did not feel right. I couldn't articulate why that didn't feel right. So then it got to a point in my career where I said, I'm going to put this narrative down. Because at the same time, what I was doing was listening to more business podcasts, entrepreneurship podcasts. And I was realizing that women were doing exceptionally well. And it had nothing to do with their gender. And I thought, hang on, how come women in entrepreneurship do not play this narrative, but women in corporate do? And that's what made me say, what, I'm just going to put it down. And when I did, I was able to realize that that narrative and that conventional set of beliefs was not serving me or my vision. That was not taking the principle based approach to achieving success on my own terms and realizing my own potential. Because potential and achievement has nothing to do with gender, but everything to do with your own thinking, your own paradigms, and the beliefs that you choose to act on or not act on. So when I realized that, hang on, there is no such thing as a glass ceiling. There is no such thing as, because of my gender, I am hard done by. In the world of entrepreneurship, that doesn't exist because I am in control of my own brand, my own business, my own income. I learned the high impact skill set. I learned the high performance mindset in order to achieve what I want. And my success that I have today has nothing to do with my gender. This was not something which predicated my success or not. So at first, yes, of course, it was important to re-experience what I had in the industry to know that I had to go down the polar opposite way and not actually promote or fly that flag because it's in its totality a set of limiting beliefs that actually prevents people from seeing what is possible and also making them build their own ceiling. Now, people don't like to hear this. And this is just one other common ideology which I vehemently reject and go against. Do I need people to agree with me? No, but I do need people to think and actually think, well, why did I choose to internalize this belief? And that could be from anything, from business to careers to anything, and actually think, is this belief, is this paradigm serving me? Because if it's not, you do need to go against the majority mindset and think for yourself.
Yeah, look, well said. And I actually completely agree with that. And it almost sounds like if you want to choose to believe that there is a glass ceiling there, well, that exists in all parts of the industry. It doesn't matter whether it comes down to sex or race or gender or height or body image. It's all around us. So yes, I think it would be prudent not to acknowledge that there are some, I'm sure there's some examples and cases where people have been involved in division because of who they are as a person or what they look like or whether they're a man or a woman. But that's always been there, and it's not up to you to hear about it and be blocked by it. It's about the leaders to acknowledge that it's there, but push forward and get on with things and do your job, isn't it? And reach for the stars with what you do.
Exactly. And I was experiencing the, whatever you want to call it, the bias, the limitations. But then I thought, hang on, if I get angry at the system, how am I benefiting me? And then I realized that even if this is happening, I did not back then, this was around 2017, maybe 15, somewhere between there, where I realized, hang on, I don't have the skill set to navigate this. I also don't have the mindset to navigate this. And it's not the system's fault. I am the one in charge of my own career. What do I need to do to bypass the system and not be another statistic? I had no interest in being another statistic and also having this victim mindset. I mean, like you said, your race, you didn't choose it. Your gender, I didn't choose it. Your religion, didn't choose it. Could you change all these things? Yes. But I'm not going to base my success on any of these things because I didn't choose it. I did not control these elements. What can I control? My mindset and my skill set development.
Yeah, well said. You're well known. You've got some best-selling books out there. Could you share some insight into what led you into writing these books and tell us about them?
I always had the vision that when I retire, I would have something to say after slogging it out in the construction industry, and then I would write a book. And as I was progressing in my thought leadership journey, it felt very natural and automatic that I would write a book. I truly believe that everyone has a book within them. So, my first book is Constructing Your Career, and it's the 12 foundational stages you need to work on the greatest project that you ever will, which is, of course, yourself. And as you're familiar with in the industry, the narrative is always about the projects, externalities, never actually looking at the individual. What Constructing Your Career does is turns that mirror around and gets you to have a holistic approach to constructing your career, allowing you to see what is possible and rejecting the conventional career intelligence, which is actually limiting people and and actually getting them to reinforce the status quo instead of shatter it. And what it is, it's, how I've written it is, this is how you build a building: design, foundation, structure, facade, maintenance, handover. And then this is how it equates to your career. Because what I find, people in the construction industry may have a great facade, meaning they're just hot air, but there's no substance and they don't know where they're going. Most people are actually missing an essential pillar in their career. So that was my first book. My second book is Leadership in Construction. It's a principle based approach to becoming an exceptional, excellent, and exemplary leader within the industry. The leadership theory, which has been perpetuated in the industry, it's been around for what, 10, 20, 50 years? And there are more problems in the industry than ever before. Has anyone actually stopped to realize it's not working? Leadership tactics, leadership theories on the whole have not actually worked. We need to go back to a principle based approach. So the book is written with 9 exceptional leaders and industry titans, and it's based on real time lessons and real time experience synthesized into key pillars of leadership: constructing you, constructing others, and then constructing businesses or projects. And then my third book, which I did not anticipate writing, but it was a book that it was the book. It was a combination of the other 2 books, and it's called Young Gun. It's How to Become an Industry Player, and it is the ultimate A to Z guide for ambitious constructors to stand out and succeed. Because you would see as well, within the industry, there's that 10%, that brilliant 10% who, if their ambition is lost, if their ambition is quelled, the industry is not one which I will say that anyone should work in the next 10 years. It is the young guns who are the last remaining hope of the industry. They're the hopium in order to ensure that the problems of today are not perpetuated. But as you know, the industry can be a very suffocating place. There are so many people who say, Aaron, you should do this, but they're not actually looking at who Aaron is, where Aaron needs to go. And what they're doing is they're reinforcing the limitations. So this is the ultimate guide for young guns to win. I want them to win. They have to win, because if they're not winning, then who is? Because it's not those with a mediocre mindset who just want to do the bare minimum and they want the absolute maximum.
I actually had New South Wales Building Commissioner David Chandler on the show as a former guest, and he's kind of an old school guy, and he was sort of talking about how younger people are in such a rush to get that project management badge, or that construction manager badge. And back in the day, like in the 80s and 90s, and if probably before that, you had to earn your stripes and you had to gain the knowledge. So you came out of university and you had to work hard. And like you said, with your 12 steps to your book, it's broken down into stages, and you've got to build the foundations, like you say, or you come out of uni, that's the design stage, and work your way up to develop that well-oiled machine, if you like, of you as a person, particularly in corporate world.
Correct. There is an obsession. I want to become a project manager. And I had that. I thought by 30, I had to become a project manager, but I always knew I have to earn my stripes. You can't work smart without first putting in the sweat equity, without first actually working hard and doing what other people don't want to do. There is no antidote to that. But I see people they want the title, they want what they perceive to be the recognition, but they don't actually want the function of management. And people need to stop basing the entirety of their existence based on a job title, or think just because, well, I've been here and I'm a I've got 1 or 2 years of experience and I know how to screw down a subby, then I want to become a project manager. That is such a toxic way of thinking, and it doesn't set someone up for long term success. And yes, you're right, there is a rush. I have to climb really quickly. Well, have you ever stopped to think, what if that ladder is leaning against the wrong wall, and then people arrive at a certain destination and they're like, hang on, this isn't what I wanted. And I felt that's exactly where my paradigm started to break down, because there was no meaning behind where I thought I was going and also why. So, yes, those who have that sense of entitlement, their path is going to run out really quickly from under them.
Now, one of the great reasons that I wanted to have a chat with you, Eleanor, is over the last two, getting on to probably 3 years now, we've seen this mass exodus of people who have had corporate careers and they've gone out. We've had COVID hit, and it's well publicized in the media about this mass exodus from the workforce. I'm going to make a prediction here that yes, that's been happening, and it has been happening for a while now. And I'm sure there's people that are construction management roles and thought, well, I've had my builder's license for some time. Now's the time to go out and get it and work for myself. What I think will happen as the economy slows down and the interest rates go up, and particularly the construction industry starts to face more and more challenges, I actually predict that there'll be a lot of people who actually, whether they want to or have to, go back and return to the corporate career in constructions. I would love for you to shed some light into corporate career and that aspect of construction.
Great prediction. Let's timestamp this and let's pull this out in 5 years and see where we all ended up. It is a truly fascinating time. And what COVID did was not actually create anything. It just exposed many people's lack of skill set, lack of preparation, lack of mindset, lack of mental resistance, just a complete lack. When, a quote that my mentor Ron Malhotra always says, when the seas are calm, then everyone can do well, right? But what do you do when the seas are rough? That's when the really good sailors are actually made. And what COVID did was not create this; it just exposed people's lack of preparedness and readiness for what will come. And we're still seeing the fallout. It's not actually not to be a pessimist person, but it's not going to get better anytime soon. Things have to get worse before they can actually get better. And it is actually a fascinating time to both be in the industry, but also take a perspective back and observe what is actually happening. I equally predict that there will be a mass exodus. Most people have realized that being in corporate is not necessarily in alignment with their vision and their values. People have had a lot of time to sit with their own thoughts and onto themselves and actually think, well, what do I actually want to experience? We are going to see more and more people who have realized that the gleam of corporate isn't that great, because there have been some companies who have done an exemplary job at supporting their employees during such turbulent times. But there have also been many companies who have just thrown out people with a scrap heap the minute that it's not working, and they just want to click back to, we've always done it this way, and that doesn't suit people. So there's been many things playing out in the industry, and yes, that has forced people to be like, well, I'll do it myself, which is great. But people have a lot of misconceptions about business. I mean, as you know, with everything that you set up and start up, it's not a walk in the park. It's not a walk in the park in the best of economic times, and it's not a walk in the park in the not so good of economic times. And the skill set and the mindset that corporate instills to some extent is useful, but there is a chasm between what it takes to succeed in corporate and what it takes to succeed in the entrepreneurial world.
What are some of the benefits of corporate life in construction that a lot of people who, might be running a construction business, they might not have the corporate structure, but those that are sort of wanting some insight into how that world works, can you shed some light into some of the aspects of that career?
What it does set you up really well for is to have that ability to look at many moving parts at one time. As you know, on a project, it's finances, it's people, it's legalities, it's the angry subby, it's the angry head contractor. You're dealing with many different personalities. And this can all happen within the span of a day. what it does is allow you to have a very macro picture, but also really get into the details. What project management teaches you is how to, you're sort of running a small business onto itself. You have inputs, you have outputs, you have to deal with certain clients, you have to do many things at the same time. People who succeed on project management, they do develop this quite dynamic mindset. They're quite flexible in their approach, and they don't get frazzled or heated up over the slightest of inconveniences. You can keep this cool, calm demeanor, and you have to, because imagine on project delivery, if everything that went wrong, you would just have an emotional reaction. You'll never get anywhere. So people who have done really well in that sense, that does lend itself to doing really well, in a business, especially in small businesses. In construction, as you know as well, it's a heavy industry based on relationships. And business is all about relationships. It's not about what I want to achieve. It's how can I always ensure that people who I work with, clients, they're achieving what they want. In turn, then I achieve what I want or what I am desiring. So that is also something that construction practice does set people up for, because it's client first. And this is something that does get ingrained into us from very early on. It's the client first. Is the client always right? Absolutely not. But they're the ones paying the bills. So I think that also lends itself to doing really well, especially in a small business. We know that it's a relationship based industry, and those who set up, trust and putting other people's needs above theirs is going to serve them well. That's a few examples, as well as also, that people say, oh, communication is key on this site, but not many people do it well. And when it comes to communication, it is quite nuanced. But those who have been able to articulate the requirements and what we're doing really well, that also starts to lend itself into business, as well as people who come through corporate that have not had that employee mindset, which is about me, right? They haven't created any economy. They have just said, well, I want more money. Give me more. I'm entitled because I've been here for 5 years. In business, no one cares about that. I don't get rewarded for what I did a few years ago. I can only get rewarded based on what I do now. And you find in construction, there are people who have exemplary entrepreneurial thinking. They're always focusing on solutions, focusing on values, focusing on other people. They will also do really well.
So, besides buying your top selling books, what's some good advice for someone who I reckon who's running a construction business, might be a tier 2 builder or tier 3 builder, and they want to add another element of corporate model, if you like, to their business? Like what's something that they could do to really make them stand out and give that feel or structure to their business?
Whether you want to call it corporate or not, it's branding and messaging. I find that in the construction industry, they've just started cottoning on to the importance of branding. I remember when I started around 2 years ago, people were laughing, mocking, thinking, what a stupid thing to build a brand in construction, let alone a personal one. And now we've found there's more of an uptake. People are realizing that they have positioned themselves like everyone else. They sound like everyone else. They look like everyone else, but they're all basing their value proposition on I'm better. Well, I can say I'm better. You can say I'm better. You can say I've done this project. I'll say I've done this project. Where does it end? It doesn't, right? It's not the right way to actually differentiate yourself in the marketplace. So companies that have made quite a serious investment in their brand, in articulating their point of differentiation. I can't say that corporate construction does this well. There are some small businesses who do this well. There are some large businesses who do this well. But when there is that magnetic and congruent branding that is based on the inside out of the company, not from the outside in, those are the ones who start to attract quite unique positioning. And more companies as well have started putting the people out behind the projects. And I love that as well. When I started my podcast 2 years ago, it was unheard of to speak about the people in construction. No, it was all about $100 million turnover, and this is how good our methodology is. And now that as well has started to shift. We'll see more of that. It's not a noisy market just yet, But to differentiate is to package everything that is unique about the essence of the company and put that out to the world in a congruent and magnetic way that you have positioned yourself as the only company who does this. You can enter into a zone of no competition, but it has to be done in a very strategic way. And it's not just about we build better and our projects are bigger.
Now, your business brand and podcast, The Construction Coach, tell us some exciting things that you're working on with that. And for those that are listening to this and want to sort of get on board and engage you, how does that work?
For anyone that would like more information or to have a conversation about their ambitions and their goals, I'm available on LinkedIn, Elinore Moshe, and on Instagram at Elinore Moshe _. One thing that I'm focusing on right now is building that army of young guns. I need an army of the young guns, that 1% in the industry who will reject the status quo, who do not want to be part of the mediocre mindset that reinforces limitations and who truly want to express their powerhouse ambitions. So, what I'm focusing on and learning on right now is building that true network of ambitious and like minded young guns. Because if they can't see what is possible and if they fall into convention, then again, the industry is not going to be a good place. Because what we are finding is that the old school leadership is dying. It's not physically, but their ideologies are going out, and people, especially in their 20s and early 30s, are realizing this isn't working for me. But they also need the guidance, they need the networks, and the direction, and also the inspiration and the courage and the backbone in order to stand up for themselves. So that community, that army of young guns who will adhere to excellence, have that high impact nature about themselves, is what I'm focusing on the most at the moment. I've had to stop myself from writing books this year. It's something that comes very easily and naturally to me. But that's the big thing that I'm focusing on is the community for young guns.
Is there a real supply and demand issue with construction management and project management in the corporate market at the moment?
There is a huge demand for A players. You can get an abundance of mediocre players, of B plus, and even A, but A plus is extremely rare to find. And that's where also the idea of young guns was seeded, because on my podcast, in talking to executives and entrepreneurs, they would always express that frustration to find truly A players who will do what it takes in order to play the long term as well. It's that alchemy of characteristics which is so rare. Is there generally a shortage? Yes, because again, people want to play the short-term game, and they want all the bells and whistles, and they want the 200K package and the car, but they can't actually deliver for the business. So is there a shortage? Yes.
What are some of the leading organizations doing that sort of sets them apart and differentiates themselves from competitors?
One thing that I have seen the minority do is create that environment which affords and allows, and for lack of a better word, allows for that expression of individuality. It's companies that will say, I want to bring together a whole bunch of individuals. We're not going to fit them into a box, and we're going to build a company around that. It's companies which allow, yeah, for lack of a better word, it's allows and actually foster that environment where they are not shrinking and suffocating the individual expression, but they encourage that expression, they encourage that individuality, they encourage ideas, they want to see ideas on the table. Whether they get enacted or not is a different thing. They have to, of course, be valuable ideas. But companies that encourage people to pursue their own goals, where they can be fulfilled at work and they don't feel like they're suffocated, I think are the ones who are doing really well. Found that over the last 2 years, where people who have wanted flexibility or have wanted different things and that's been accommodated, they've been able to retain that.
Yeah, look, I think that's obviously very valuable for people that are in that career. And I think it's also a lifestyle kind of thing. So it's about balance, and balance is a very broad term. But I think the key difference, I mean, everyone who's worked in corporate sees the light to say, well, oh, look, I'd love to go out and work for myself. It's, work flexibly and I can work my own hours. But then when you actually take that plunge, it's sometimes not all that it's cracked up to be. And there's all these different challenges. And so this is exactly what I'm sort of talking about, that I think that there'll be a percentage of people that have done that or are thinking about doing it, and then they will return to that. And if they can still have their one day a week from home, or do something in their community, or be a part of regular networking, such as your organization, or I guess it's not changing the model, but it's tweaking it to maybe add another 10%, change 10%, or it could be 25% of what's currently in their workplace. And all of a sudden, you've got a tier one workforce that loves what they are doing.
Definitely. And that tweaking part is essential. And, for example, there are people who have, because of economic conditions, or they want to pursue a passion, or all of a sudden they had more time because they were not commuting, they might have started a side hustle or something on the side. And I certainly have, from my experience, found that people get threatened by that because they think you're just going to leave. Well, if people actually, well, companies, if they accommodated for that and actually realize that this might not be a financial thing, this might be a person wanting to express their passion, they will become even more fulfilled at work and even more likely to stay at work. So it's recognizing that people are multidimensional. They're not these one-dimensional characters that can only do one thing. And if they dare to have anything outside of work, not even a side hustle, it could be family, it could be sport, it could be being on a board, again, it could be anything. Being able to integrate the two models is going to be beneficial in the long term.
Yeah, well said. Now, what's on the cards? What's in future for Constructing You?
The podcast is on a mission to expand globally, because what I found is that the principles of what it takes to succeed in construction are universal. And from my own experience, I always found that taking a principle based approach will lend itself to its success. And now I'm on a mission with Constructing You, my podcast, to prove that there is a set of principles that people who have done exceptional things in the industry, they adhere to. There is no secret. It might take a very long time, but I will interview someone from every country on the world to prove that what it takes to become an exceptional, exemplary, and excellent person in construction is absolutely universal. So that's the mission with the podcast. Of course, the mission with the books is to get it into as many hands as possible. And of course, there are the mentoring programs and everything that are always expanding, as well as the community. So always on an upwards trajectory, and I'm also thinking about, what does the industry need now? It's changed from when I started 2 years ago. So it's always about looking at, what does the industry need now that they don't have access to, that if they had, would absolutely transform them from the inside out.
I'm finding, particularly with the people that I work with, people are open to everything and anything at the moment. Well, the world's changed, right? So the industry's changed as well. So people are running organizations are very much like, well, we actually want to find out what people want. And if me as a CEO says to, my staff, oh, tell me what's going on in the business, what do we need to do to improve things around here and improve our company, you might get a limited group of feedback. Whereas businesses now more than ever are actually saying, look, Eleanor, I'll bring you into my business. I want to find out, how can I improve my workforce? What do they want? What do I need to change? Because the workload's there, the reputation's there, but if I don't have the people, the business is nothing. So help me keep these people, train these people, find out what they want, and filter it back to the CEO or the managing director to actually action those changes.
It goes back to listening, and this was always a massive point of frustration, is that people would not hear you and they would not see you. You could actually be telling them in as clear as day what the point of frustration is, and what they just try and do is put you back into the box. So actually listening to what is being said, but also what is not being said, and seeing the whole person, allowing people to bring their whole person to work. And yes, correctly, as you said, providing also that psychological safety to say something and not actually be, discouraged or labeled as a troublemaker for expressing a thought that is slightly left of field. I mean, how dare you, right?
Absolutely. But that's what it's about. It's about having those honest conversations and working together on you know coming up with solutions that are practical within reason, of course. I mean, maybe if you're a project manager and you're asking for maybe 2 or 3 days remote work, well, that's going to be challenging, obviously. And that's probably part of the problem with construction as well. It is very much hands on. You have to be involved. You have to be within an arm's reach of that project, because as soon as you go too far, things start to happen that impact the project's performance.
Definitely, definitely. It does have its, everything that we've been talking about. It's not a tech company. It's not a laptop lifestyle. And there's a big difference between a project manager and an excavator operator, right? They may not have that flexibility, but this still comes back to people knowing, what do I want? What do I actually want from my career? What are the values that I want to instill and live by? And if someone wants to, do that, be that project manager and it ticks all their boxes, then fantastic. But if it doesn't, then what do I need from my career in order to be fulfilled? And then what is the vehicle in order to get there? It might be employment, it might be a hybrid, it might be working from Bali, I don't know. It might be a small business, it might be your own construction company. It could be anything, but this is the question that people need to ask themselves, and that is, what do I really, really, really want? In university, people are still only shown a one-dimensional pathway, meaning you have to work for the biggest builders with the biggest cranes, and you need to become a project manager. There are so many options within the industry. There's Contech, there's quantity surveying, there's all sorts of consultancies. The list is endless. I think it's more important that people are keen and comfortable with exploring first, rather than all rushing to work for the tallest tower with the biggest crane. It's not as lucrative as they make it out to be. It's actually quite limiting. I think that's what's really important, is having that willingness to explore. And even I didn't have that at first. I was so scared. I wanted to move to client-side project management early on, but when you start asking other professionals questions, you get this roaring, no, you need to stick it out and go for the largest projects. And I'm like, oh, okay, majority are saying this, it must be right. And the alarm bells didn't go off when I was mid-20s. Well, if majority are saying it, I have to go the other way, because the more that I followed that conventional, I'm not even going to call it advice, it was useless opinions, the more and more that I hated my career. So the perfect career is one that you have carved out for yourself against all convention, not following the herd, all applying for, the most lucrative grad positions. There are people who would love to work in fit out or residential, or again, anything. The industry is so multifaceted. And if I could do it all over again, I would probably end up in fit out and residential. I actually love that. But there's such an ego within the industry that the bigger the contract, the better you are. But there's no correlation between that when you actually dissect that.
Yeah, it's very macho style, isn't it? And you do see it when you see job descriptions that are on job adverts and things like that that you see from time to time, where we are this, we are that, and it's very macho. And as you say, some of the most happiest, content, and successful businesses are those that aren't there beating their chests, and they're just running a well-oiled machine and just moving forward and having a great reputation, looking after their staff, not doing anything extreme. Some of the things you see that Google were doing 10 years ago and stuff like that, because we can't do that in our industry. It's not possible all the time. So it's about listening to your people, balancing that, finding out what they want, which is consistent with what you're about and the construction coach, Elinore. So hats off to you. Well done. And I really appreciate you coming on to Build Hatch. And for those that are listening and want to reach out and get into contact with you, what's the best way to go about it?
Elinore Moshe on LinkedIn, at Elinore Moshe _ on Instagram, and my website is theconstructioncoach.com.au. All books are available through Amazon, if in Australia also Booktopia, but again also on my website, theconstructioncoach.com.au.
Elinore, thanks again for coming on to Build Hatch, and it's been really nice getting to know you, and look forward to staying in touch in future.
Definitely. Thank you, Aaron.
Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with Elinore Moshe from The Construction Coach. And I certainly encourage everyone to head over and have a listen to her Constructing You podcast. If you know a hard worker having a go in the construction space or a building related business, person or product where you love what they are doing or selling, then please do get into contact with us and we'll be more than happy to tell their story and get behind their goods or services on the Build Hatch marketplace. Our team are busy rolling out independent sellers on buildhatch.com as we speak, so stay tuned for more and more products and services as they onboarded. As usual, please check out our Instagram page and other socials where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and some of the features of the work that we talk about. Have a great week and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.